Action, a Gender Data Playbook for Women's Financial Inclusion. This session launches the Gender Data Playbook, and the playbook is a culmination of 3 years of work and really going back 9 years of an incredible partnership, the Women's Financial Inclusion Data Partnership. The partnership started in 2014. It's amazing that we have gone through 9 years with 3 partners. We are now 10 partners, and it includes international financial institutions and other agencies that are in the business of producing and overseeing the production of gender data for financial inclusion. We are tremendously grateful, and Data2X and myself in particular, to the partnership and the partners. They have been amazing partners, and throughout the years, I think that the partnership is a very good example of how we can advance in providing gender data for financial inclusion. As I said, this is 9 years of the partnership, and it's 3 years of a pilot study in 6 countries, and the Gender Data Playbook is the result of that work. We at Data2X are incredibly grateful to the people, to the partners in the 6 countries that really did all the work for this. So grateful to them, grateful to Consumer Centrics that provided a lot of the technical work in the countries. And I am particularly grateful also to our partner, the Financial Alliance for Women, that really led the technical work. So without further ado, I am delighted now to introduce you to Rebecca Ruff. She's Vice President for Programs at the Financial Alliance for Women, and she will present the playbook. Rebecca, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Myra. Hi, everyone. I'm so delighted to present to you the Gender Data Playbook. And as Myra was saying, this really is a combination of work from the last 3 years when we were working in the 6 pilot countries, but even beyond that, as we started, as Myra was saying, 2014, when talking about sex-disaggregated data was so limited, it was hard to get into anybody's agenda, really. And so just getting this event and even just an entire tool that only focuses on that is really quite exciting and incredible. And a lot of the people here today really contributed to this work, although we fit partners, the other countries beyond the pilots as well. And just a huge shout out to my team, particularly in the Financial Alliance for Women, for all the support and work that went into this playbook, as well as the team at Consumer Centrics, and of course, our incredible collaboration with Data2X. So why develop a gender data playbook? Well, we saw, as we have been working on this for many years, we saw that there was a lot of practice and a lot of experiences were increasingly being generated, but a lot of the work was quite done organically, quite ad hoc. And so we felt we really needed to develop a practical approach given the complexity of the topic, but also it was a topic that was new for many. It was also important to incorporate the interests of all the actors. So we saw that this as a key learning in our work to truly become an ecosystem approach, we really needed to incorporate all of those interests. And finally, we really wanted to make sure that we were leveraging the learnings from other countries. And this was actually something that came from the countries themselves. They really wanted to learn from each other, know what the others were doing, but they wanted to ensure that others could also gain from those experiences. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't reinventing the wheel and that others could also tap into this work. So the playbook was really developed for national level women's financial inclusion stakeholders. So really everyone from regulators to industry conveners, to financial inclusion advocates, to financial institutions, really interested in driving this in their market. In the next slide, you'll see that the playbook is really designed as a hands-on, user-friendly manual. This was really important to us that it become a practical tool that people can actually use. So we incorporated tools, we incorporated resources, insights, lessons, really everything that we thought would be practical to advance gender data in their own markets. So it really lays out a 5-step process, as you can see here, that can help jumpstart a country's data disaggregation journey, or help those that already have one improve what they are doing. And note that there are 5 steps, however, only one is actually focused on data systems. And I think this was also a big learning for us, that really this is complicated work, and data is only part of the equation. So in the next slide, I'd like to delve a little bit more on the 5-step approach. So we really start with diagnose, where we consider the current state of women's financial inclusion and how are different financial services actors serving women. I'll talk a little bit more about this step in a second. Step 2 is really about building awareness about the importance of gender data. And this was really one of the most important lessons, that raising awareness was an ongoing process. So we needed to start at the beginning of the gender data journey with that. So in this step, we really focus on identifying champions that can help support, as well as the importance of building a business case for targeting women, as this was really important, that the data is really used to see that business potential. We also discussed the importance of consulting the private sector, and again, bringing in those different stakeholder interests across, and also addressing privacy concerns is one of the key sort of insights that we heard from a lot of the diagnostic work we did. In step 3, we really focus on the data systems. So what do we need to do to begin or enhance the data collection, talking about setting baselines and aligning on definitions. One key step that we also found through the work was really the importance of automating collection, because there was a lot of manual work being done. And then finally, ensuring that the information is analyzed with a gender lens and used to its best potential. And the use of data visualization, such as dashboards. Step forward, we found that an important success factor was really ensuring that institutions have the skills and resources necessary to sustain the gender data. So we spent a whole step on this because we felt it was so important. So the 4th step really focuses on building gender data literacy and capabilities, both of the aggregators as well as FSP upskilling. And finally, the last step, we really saw that efforts to increase the flow of gender data will only have an impact if the data is actually put to use. So this step really focuses on mainstreaming the gender data internally through the organization, through communications efforts, but also making sure that you're aligning with organizational strategies and incorporating a diversity and inclusion focus. Although in some cases data disaggregation was mandated, we also found that it's really crucial to generate momentum and really focus on the so what of the data. So in the next slide, you will see that each section really begins with key questions to consider so that all the learnings and tools can be applied to each country's realities. So as you can see here in the diagnose section, which is step 1, I'll go a little bit deeper on step 1. Really, the first step involves assessing the current state of women's financial inclusion using the available data and mapping the ecosystem to really identify those key players that are using as well as aggregating the data. Then understanding the gaps in gender data collection and assessing the readiness of the ecosystem. In the next slide, you'll see that there are a number of lessons and illustrations in each of the sections. So here you can see we begin with a recommendation to gather more intelligence from financial service providers in terms of how they collect and use gender data. So then we provide a tool, which is a sample survey of FSPs to understand how they serve the women's market and what gender data they currently collect and how they use it. So we give you that tool, we give you the sample survey, and then we have cases. So in this case, we have the case of Zambia, where we show you their survey and we show you the results of this survey. And then in the next slide, we also provide you with helpful frameworks. So again, in step 1, we've created this readiness level framework that was built on our initial work back in 2014 as part of the gender data strategy to understand where a country or where an ecosystem lies when it comes to gender data. So this framework really helps you assess the readiness level of the ecosystem and gives you a clear understanding of what is currently available, what is missing, so you can really start addressing the gaps. And you can use this playbook basically at any point of your journey. You don't have to be starting. In the next slide, we just wanted to give you a sense of some of the other tools that we have in the different sections and the different steps. So we have tools, we have research insights, such as on the left here, you can see the market opportunity revenue potential estimates, which we conducted with CCX for the 6 countries. And we also give you a tool so you can do it yourself. We also have best practices from everything from the types of gender indicators collected to how to do so. And we have a number of country examples and cases with real life experiences. And finally, in the final slide of my presentation, just to conclude, although each ecosystem will chart a different pathway and each journey will be different, we really hope that by developing a common approach, more countries and more financial service providers will join these efforts and will be able to continue learning from each other. So how do you access the playbook? We'll post the link at the end of this event. We want to make sure that you stay with us for the entire event, and you'll also get an email following up with more information. So please enjoy. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any insights, additions, enhancements, we would also love to hear from all of those that have other experiences. Thank you so much. Back to you, Myra.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. As you can see, and it's sort of a big, I think, takeaway from our work, this is that data is never just data, that there's a lot sort of in the process of collecting the data, behind the data, and then in using the data, right? Data without being used makes no sense. And I think it is this playbook gives you a very clear understanding of all the different factors that you need to take into account to really collect data that is going to be used to promote women's financial inclusion. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for your presentation. And the other thing that comes out clearly from the playbook is that national actors are key. I mean, there is a role for the international actors and stakeholders to encourage, to draw lessons learned, but really the playbook is addressed, and it should be addressed to national actors that are going to really move the needle in terms of getting the right kind of data, supply side and demand side data, to promote women's financial inclusion in the countries. And I am delighted now to introduce a panel with national data actors that have been working in putting together in the pilot studies and in putting together the playbook. And I'm first delighted to introduce Tamara Cook. She's going to moderate the panel. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Sector Deepening in Kenya. The panelists are Dr. Paul Oluikpe. He is the head of Financial Inclusion Delivery Unit in the Central Bank of Nigeria. Ms. Alba Luz Valladares O'Connor, she is the comisionada of the Comisión Nacional de Bancos y Seguros, the National Insurance and Banking Commission of Honduras. And Mr. Abul Bashar, he is the Executive Director of the Financial Inclusion Unit of Bangladesh Bank. So here we have representatives of 3 different regions: Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And let's see what they have learned from the playbook and how they're going to be using the playbook. Tamara, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Myra. And if I could ask the 3 panelists to turn their videos on as well and unmute your mics. For those of you who don't know me, I was just introduced, but not only am I the CEO of FSD Kenya, I also have the honor of being the chair of the FSD Network, which is the family of financial sector deepening programs across the continent. And we are currently collaborating on gender. And so this is important for all of our work. Do I have my panelists? Yes, I do. Great. Good. So let's dig right in. Rebecca's done an excellent job of taking us through the playbook and those 5 steps. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hear from these 3 panelists about some of their experiences with each of these 5 steps. And we're going to start with the second step, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Oluikpe. We haven't met in person, so I haven't said your name right. I'm sure you'll say it better. And we'd like to talk about step 2. So for those of you who may even just be joining us, step 2 in the playbook focuses on raising awareness. And when Rebecca talked about how, yes, the data systems are important, but there's all these other wraparound things that have to happen to get the data right. And so for you, as you think about your experience in Nigeria, one of the highlights is the use of the demand side data as a starting point for raising awareness about the importance of supply side data. So how did the demand side data help raise awareness around the importance of supply side data in Nigeria? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tamara. And yes, you did pronounce my name very well. So,
as we say here.
Yeah. All right. So we, having been part of the initiative here in Nigeria, and also having been part of the project, as you know, for more than a decade, we've been collecting demand-side data, especially the FINA Access to Financial Services Survey in Nigeria, which scopes individuals' perception of their level of access to financial products and services, and also their usage. And so these surveys, they highlight key issues, but then we need to counterbalance and complement the surveys with supply-side data. The key reason is because a survey from a customer point of view would obviously sometimes be blindsided to the evidence base that is within suppliers like financial services providers. So for us to provide a balanced perspective, we kind of need to cross-validate assumptions and conclusions arising from these demand-side surveys, with supply-side data. And why is that? Because demand-side data, while it is empirical and statistically significant, we can say, we must not lose sight of the fact that surveys lie in the realm of perceptions sometimes. They are also prone to issues around sampling and margins of error. So as a result, there are inherently issues of validity, consistency, representativeness, and accuracy of measurements. And also, over time, the continued relevance of the results of those surveys as demographics continue to change, right? But what doesn't change is much is supply side data, users' habits, customer habits. You can always track that. They are captured, they are formalized, they are in your systems. And so hence the relevance and importance of supply side data in cross-validating assumptions that we gather from demand side surveys. Demand side surveys are very fluid, could be very, very kind of disruptive because they change over time in a way. But supply side data is stable and reliable anytime, any day. It's just sitting there. I call it a high amplitude data. It's transactional. It is already a finished data. It's in its state, easily used, and you can source it and utilize it for any purpose. And that's why both sides of the divide, both sides of the data, both demand and supply side, are very relevant. We must make sure that we counterbalance, the insights we gain from each of these with each other. So we always keep reconciling that. That's why. So we need to we raise the awareness in the sense that, you know, we raise awareness in the sense that this data can provide a holistic picture for our clients, for our stakeholders, and that it can offer insight, and that it can provide financial services providers with that kind of, you know, insight that will help them design products and services to meet the needs of their clientele, and especially in terms of gender, to meet the needs of women who really are customers, and then also the needs of women who are not customers currently, because current data can help us simulate what likelihood or potentialities, you know, would arise with customers who are not already being served by us. So there's always a win-win for everyone. And so that's really the catch. That's the unique selling point for supply side data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I like to think of the magic that happens when you bring demand side data to supply side together and they speak to each other. And you talked about cross-validating, counterbalancing, and just the importance of those two talking to each other. I think it's important that we have both, as you're saying, so that they can ask questions of each other. If you're seeing something on demand side that's not showing up in the supply side, what questions can you ask about the validity of the data, about how to improve the quality of the data, so that we can have a better picture of sex disaggregated data and the implications for women's financial inclusion. As we stay in this topic of raising awareness, Doctor, how did the Central Bank of Nigeria work with stakeholders across the Nigerian financial ecosystem, which is as complex as any, to roll out and implement the supply side data collection? What was the biggest challenge for CBN to create awareness about the need for more supply side gender data and gain buy-in to relevant policies or requests from the financial sector?
Thank you very much. We all know that change is always difficult, especially when organizations and individuals and decision makers are not used to the change being introduced. So if the change is not already woven into the fabrics of the institution or the organization, so to speak, it's often constraining for everyone involved. So it becomes difficult to sell. So it requires a change of mindset, sometimes resource commitments, process adaptations, like it's not something you are used to reporting, so you need to reconfigure your processes to be able to begin reporting it, or even a system change or system reconfiguration, and even the institutional capacity, what we call absorptive capacity, to be able to effect that change. So what we did on our part is to take incremental steps, beginning from creating awareness and then providing some evidence relative to how supply side data can help organizations understand the trends evident in their service to customers. The data is there. You can slice and dice it any way you like, but certain insights will emerge. So it's potentially valuable for organizations. You need to understand the demographics that you serve, and then also from there, take a leapfrog to demographics that you do not already serve sufficiently. So there's always that positive, you know, externality to mining supply side data, and what value can be derived from it. We also provide that, we proffer that as a bet to organizations to say, look, you can reap a lot of value, you can appropriate value from mining the data that you have and from reporting it. And you can also use it, assuming you are doing so well in serving your customers, you can use it as a pitch, you know, for so many things. You can use it as a catch, even to get more customers to say, look, we are very good at serving this demographic, the women demographic. And so if you come and bank with us, if you serve with, if you give us your account, we will serve you even better than we are doing at the moment. Here is our value proposition. These are the things we need to do. So organizations can use it for a strategic pitch. They can use it for their marketing. They can say, okay, over 1 million women are banking with us. We've served them creditably well, and we will do the same for you, even better. So there is no downside to this, not at all. You know, so
if you pitched this as well to the financial sector players in Nigeria, as you've just done to us, I can see how you were able to get buy-in.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that question?
Absolutely. I'm done. I'm good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And I forgot to say at the beginning that although the chat function is disabled, we would really love the participants to use the Q&A function. So anything, even if it's a comment or a question about anything that any of the panelists are saying, or from Rebecca's presentation, clarity that you'd like about the steps or the process or the other countries that were part of this pilot, including Kenya, please put those there and we will come back to those after a couple of more planned questions with the panelists. So let's turn to Honduras and let's turn to step 3. If you remember those 5 steps from the initial presentation. Ms. Valladares, step 3 of the playbook focuses on the specific system changes needed to start or enhance the collection and use of gender data or sex disaggregated data. So in Honduras, can you tell us about the process of setting up the data systems to collect that data? Why did CNBS decide to partner with a third party to collect the data? How have you been able to expand the data collection to other institutions that are not regulated by CBNS? Over to you.
Hi, Tamara. Thanks for your question. First of all, we need to start with to approach the private sector. So CNBS began by asking banks to report gender disaggregated data on an individual level to the Honduras banks. However, at that time, banks were not fully aware of the general importance of gender data or how they could benefit from collecting this information. The banks also first showed their annoyance at their legal obligations regarding the privacy of their customers' financial information. So this requires some dialogues with the banking sector in which result a solution emerged. CNBS worked with AIBA, that is the National Association of Banks here in Honduras, and a process whereby the request disaggregated data will be provided to a third party jointly owned by 14 commercial banks, at exception of one bank that refused to participate in the process. The Interbank Processing Center, CEPROBAN, was that partner that we used to recollect that data. This solution was put into practice and CEPROBAN anonymized and consolidated the individual customer data for all banks, and it transmitted us that all that information that they gathered was transmitted to CNBS. In the case of microfinance institutions, CNBS partnered with Red Micro and the Regional Microfinance Association Red CAMIF to obtain disaggregated data by sex. So first, what we did was to start a private sector dialogue, and they have all the banks here own CEPROBAN, so they set all the information and then they send it to us.
Great. And what would you consider as the biggest challenge in developing the data systems? And did it differ by player, the types of players that you were working with, banking, microfinance, insurance, et cetera?
I believe the first step is to generate that consciousness on the high levels of the institutions, and then to start talking to them about their systems and how that information that they will send to us as regulators will help them to understand the trends and maybe establish new business models for products and services for women.
Great, thank you. I see one question in the Q&A. So participants, please start putting your questions or comments in there or things you'd like to share. As we reflect on this experience from Honduras and step 3 in the tool, we'd like to move on to step 4 and turn to Bangladesh. So Mr. Bashar, it's great to have you as part of this panel, and this is also our first time meeting. And step 4 is about building capability and looking at the way we can improve gender data collection analysis capabilities within the data providing and data aggregating institutions. So in Bangladesh, I know this is something you've thought a lot about at Bangladesh Bank. So why did Bangladesh Bank work on building the capacity, both internally of your teams, as well as of the financial sector, to collect and use sex disaggregated data? Tell us about the work so far on building capacity and what you are planning going forward. Over to you, Mr. Bashar.
Thank you very much for your question, respected moderator. You know that Bangladesh is a very densely populated country. We have a skilled gender gap 20%, according to Findex published in 2021. So you know that in Bangladesh Bank being the central bank and the regulator of banking and non-bank financial institution, we have already some departments like Financial Inclusion Department, Payment System Department, Sustainable Finance Department, Agriculture Credit Department. They are collecting data monthly basis, and we have a very dedicated department called a Statistics Department. So a Statistics Department nowadays, it is a data hub. So sex disaggregated data, we are just focusing on it. And for that, we are working on it. You know that Bangladesh is a principal member of AFI. And here we have a group, AFI working group for financial data. They are our official join in different seminars, different workshop and webinar, and also different peer learning session. After joining the session, they have disseminated their experience to our colleagues. You also know that we have a training academy. We in different time just make different schedule, and we also send our official to make
I think we may have lost Mr. Bashar. Can anyone else hear him? No. Okay. If I could have those who are supporting the
also sorry,
Mr. Bashar, Mr. Bashar, we just missed a few things. Your last sentence or two. Could you please repeat your last sentence or two?
because there was a telephone call, that's why. So
No problem.
you know that there are a lot of financial service providers. We are regularly having meetings with them, and we are just instructing them to collect sex disaggregated data, because sex disaggregated data plays a pivotal role, particularly in widening financial inclusion for women. And you also know that Bangladesh Bank has been given a very responsibility, responsibility of NP's implementation. So there are different stakeholders apart from bank and non-bank financial institution, other stakeholders like insurance companies, MRA, microfinance institution, capital market players, also government, different organization, Bangladesh Post Office. We are also sitting with them, and we are just directing them. We are also giving instruction so that they can just develop their data efficiency. And by this time, you'll be happy to learn them in different meetings. We have been able to have their focal points, and we are working on it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bashar. You've already spoken about many of the challenges in capacity building, but what would you say has been your biggest so far, or the biggest one you're anticipating?
Yeah. You know, this for banks and NBFIs, it is not a challenge because supply side data we are having. But as Bangladesh Bank has been given the responsibility of NP's implementation, so there have been added some sector like insurance, cooperative society, BFO, Bangladesh Post Office, and some other government organizations that do not have a central database. So it will take time to train them, and we are working on it. Apart from this, there are some other also challenges we are facing because some organizations timely do not respond to us. Through ministry, we have to approach them. So accordingly, we are approaching our ministry, and they are coordinating with them. And we are hopeful that we would be able to train them and also have a very good tracker of data. And you will also be happy. You will also be happy to learn that by this time we have started to develop NFIS data tracker. And our 2Y, a government organization, they are helping us. It is about to, they are working on it. and it is they are collecting information from us. Once it is developed, you'll see a very holistic, very different view in Bangladesh.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a great word to end on as we think about how we started about how the supply and demand side data speak to each other and how we can think about this. So I'm gonna, before we move to the final questions, I see a great question from the audience that I'd like to ask all three panelists, if we're able to pin all three of the panelists to the homepage. And it's, how did you address the issue of data quality at FSPs? Often gender attributes are incomplete or incorrect. And so I'd like to add on to this question and to hear from each of you. And I think we'll start in Honduras, then go to Nigeria, and then to Bangladesh to hear, is inaccurate supply side data an issue in terms of the gender being correct or sex being correct? And do you have a story about it? If you have any story that you can tell us about something that happened that that would speak to this question, that'd be great. Starting with you, Ms. Feodoris. Oh, you're on mute still, if you could unmute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. From Honduras example, one of our biggest challenge was that the biggest challenge we faced when we began to request the disaggregated data by sex was that many institutions did not have the detailed data. And the other one was when we start to receive that information, if the data was accurate or not. So what we made or what we did was to send like working tables with the sectors that were sending us the information so we can agree what type of information we need, which factors, which elements, and explain to them why and create that consciousness on them why we needed that accurate data, because then we're going to establish some reports and maybe dashboard that will be the information they will need to understand trends and to establish models.
Great. Let's hear from Nigeria. Any examples?
Okay.
Or
Yeah, thank you very much. From our standpoint, we really want to extract or harvest that information in an automated fashion. The bank verification numbers contain all the details of every customer using banking or services or financial services. So it is not even the case that certain information would be incomplete, but we would have the basic information, all the basic KYC information, because it's even an infringement for a financial service provider not to get a customer to fill out all the basic information that are pre-required for KYC. If any of them is missing, KYC is incomplete and there's no way the individual can access banking services or financial services. So basically, the basic threshold of information is always met. We also have a template that we've been working with that we've exposed to stakeholders to say these are the kind of information you need to comply with. But then we want to work, we want to extract the information using APIs from the reporting systems in the banking sector, so that so we will meet the basic threshold. Basically, thank you.
very interesting, and linked to another question coming up. Mr. Bashar, over to you.
Yeah. So we are optimistic people. First of all, I like to offer my thanks to Data 2X and Consumer Centric. They help a lot, particularly, you know, that we are going to have the service of cloud service of disaggregated data. Already it is being launched in Bangladesh very soon. We feed data. Another one is that in every interval, we are sitting with our financial service providers. They are cooperating us, and we are transforming into a digitalized society. So we think that once upon a time, we'll see that the gender gap will be reduced, and we'll find a very satisfactory picture, particularly in reducing gender gap in Bangladesh.
Great. The next question we have looks like it's actually maybe for Rebecca around the use of non-financial data, but also the inclusion of fintechs. In the 3 countries, can I just maybe even see a show of hands? Are you including fintechs in your initiative? Not in Honduras, in Bangladesh, and not in Nigeria. Okay, so there's an opportunity for us to think about how to include those going forward. From David, please go ahead.
We are teasing out the prospects of that. We have them in our scoping, but some of them do not report to us, to the regulator. But those who report to us, definitely we will harvest that information. So it's a relatively unexplored area. There's so much happening there. Not everyone is formalized.
Yeah, no, it's a good point about how do you get the data from those who don't necessarily report to the regulator, and the regulator can ask for things that it's more difficult to ask for those who aren't regulated. Our next question is from a good friend, David Taylor, who works closely with FSD Kenya, and I also know he's worked with many of you on this, and he's asking about the importance of a unique ID in the process of collecting and managing gender. Dr. Paul, you already mentioned this in your previous answer, but you may want to add something more onto that, but also how that can link to the benefits of automating data collection and overcoming the challenge of calculating financial inclusion. Dr. Paul, do you want to start, and then we can hear from the others if they have something on this, the importance of a unique ID and how that links to sex-disaggregated KYC.
Thank you very much. BVM, which is the unique ID, the unique ID for banking services, or I would say is the fundamental ID for banking or financial services in Nigeria, provides us with an opportunity to capture potentially everyone who is a bankable adult in Nigeria. And it has all the data fields that are required to do KYC, both gender, name, location, contact details, and then also links you to a financial profile that expectedly would allow financial services providers or any data analysts to analyze the trends, patterns, and associations in terms of the habits and profiles of that user, or maybe at an aggregate level, especially for women, for any gender at all, to see what's happening here, their preferences, their choices, and then what are the opportunities that for pitching a product for those segments. So the unique ID is robust, and it is the fundamental thing that we have, and it offers a whole lot of opportunity.
Anything to add from Honduras or Bangladesh on that?
So from Bangladesh, you know that it's a good idea. We have our national data server, okay, unique ID to every citizen who are above 18 years of age. Our authority has served a smart card mostly, but still there is redundancy of data. So we are hoping that once a smart card has been delivered to each individual, each citizen, I think it will be reduced and we can have the actual picture.
Great.
Actually,
the unique, oh, go ahead, please.
Actually, from Honduras, we use in all the financial products, or when you're going to open a product on a bank, the national identification document, and that's like a unique code, so we can know Albalu Valladares is always the same in the different banks because of that number.
Sure. And that deals with the question around multiple, what all 3 of you have said around the multiple accounts and being able to count accurately. But I know in Kenya, and I'm sure it's true in your countries, there are many people who use the same account. There may be one account and it may be registered to one person, but there may be a wife, a child, and even an auntie who uses that same account. And so how can that kind of be uncovered through supply side data? Any thoughts? And it's okay if you don't. Okay. The next question is actually from my colleague who leads our work in sex disaggregated data, Lukanya Makunda. And she congratulates you, Dr. Paul, on this achievement, and asks how you were able to get banks to agree to report, and how did you have to enforce them? You talked about that cell job that you did, but what about enforcement?
Well, we currently, we are building it into, we aim to extract it because the data is already there. We want to automate it, and we've been working with Data2X, Anna and the team, basically to structure this and coordinate. We are still at very, it hasn't gotten to very advanced stages, but we've done some teasing out. We've done some, experimentation with the data already available. They've been reporting to us previously. We receive all of these reports. But what has happened is that currently there has been no insight in terms of crunching this data and making it actionable and utilizing it for decisioning. So we just have this trove of documents that are there, but we need to make sure that it's in a randomized format that we can analyze it. And that's what Anna and team have been helping us with to try and do. But then we are not looking at this stage, we are looking at moral suasion and not sanctions. But we're even looking at a very pervasive way of collecting it. We collect it from origin, from the client themselves. They've provided all of the information when they are onboarding, and then their customer profiles and their habits. We harvest from the systems, the reporting systems automatically.
Thanks. And Alba, you used associations. How long did it take for the FSPs to change their systems?
Actually, the association, but that unit code I was telling you was the national document identification we have. Some institutions need to make some changes on their systems because not all of them use that identification. So we start working with them, and was a long process because sometimes not every institution or every bank have the same sources. But actually we're receiving more information with that association.
Great, thanks. The next question is around specifically MIS and system challenges. We talked about data quality earlier, but what about any MIS challenges that you've seen on the FSP side, the financial service providers? Anything? And while you're thinking about that, I'll give you another option, which is around joint accounts. I talked about the informal use of an account by more than one person, but what about formal joint accounts? How does that show up in your sex disaggregated data? If a couple, for example, jointly owns, or two business owners, a man and a woman, or something like that.
In Honduras, for example, actually you can have like, maybe two people have one bank account, because you need the sign of both persons to get out the cash or money. So, but there's one that is the principal of that account. So they report that principal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we're working to get both of them.
Okay,
Great.
how it works,
Go
because
go ahead.
I do have, why I know it happens is I do have a joint account personally. So we are both reported at separate entities. So it shows up in any of my other profiles that I have an account. So it shows up in my name, in my gender. And then the other person, the other partner, also it will show up in their profile, in their gender as well. So why it is counted as one account, but in terms of individuals, at the individual level, there is a split. Okay, so it's associated with a male and then associated with a female. So because you make joint decisions on that account, so every transactional activity that happens there is segmented or attached to each of you. So there is a double counting involved in terms of profiling. It affects your credit rating and also affects my own credit rating exactly in the same way. So there must be this duality of treatment in the joint accounts. That's the way I've experienced it. That's the way it works in my own personal account.
No, that's important. And I think it's important to distinguish between the rules around joint accounts, right? They can be either to sign, both to sign, and there can be social norms that can influence how much power either the man or woman has over such an account, which can be taken into account. We only have a few minutes left for this fascinating panel, and there are so many more questions pouring in. And so I'm going to ask the panelists if you have the Q&A open. I'm going to let you address any of them that are there. So I don't know if you've been looking at them, but I'll open it up. There's some around, there's a question about the Ecuador experience, about local banks needing capacity building, about how regulators can use this data to determine financial inclusion. And there's also about incentives. How do you incentivize this? And whether national financial inclusion strategies or gender targets are important, for example. So that's a whole bunch of stuff all at once. Alba, you look like you want to speak. Or you're overwhelmed? No, go ahead.
For example, we use the data that we receive because we're working on some indicators for financial inclusion, specifically to know how does women are attended by banks and other financial institutions. And when we have that information, we start studying, okay, what norms or regulations we have that can help incentivize banks to create women programs or women accounts. That's what we do with the information.
Great. Dr. Paul, would you like to comment on any of those in your last minute?
I just dropped you a message. For some reason,
Oh, you can't see it. Hold on.
Yes.
Okay. Mr.
Yes.
Bashar, can you see it? Do you have anything to add on that? No. All right. Well,
sorry.
oh, please go ahead. Yes, Mr. Bashar.
In Bangladesh, I want to add one thing more. You know that in school, we have started school banking in Bangladesh from 2013. And you know that minor is not allowed to operate their account. So with their birth registration certificate, we open the account in Bangladesh and we allow their guardians to withdraw money to make the transaction. There is a certain limit, and these accounts are no-fail accounts. Okay.
Okay. No, that's interesting. Dr. Paul, I'm going to give you one of the questions since you can't see them. What about gender financial inclusion for the lower socioeconomic strata? So we've been talking about sex disaggregation, but what about not gender, but poverty levels, for example? Are you looking at that in this initiative?
Yes, part of what this initiative will help us to do is to look at the data that is available as to how women are accessing financial services. And it will also amplify the issues around the barriers to their accessing financial services, especially vis-a-vis, when we come vis-a-vis men. And so the data is there. We look at the number of men who are accessing versus the number of women who are accessing, and then also the quality of service, access and the depth of access, for example, credit. And then we look at it. Then there is this entire whole segment that is completely outside the financial services, who are either poor or not able, cannot afford formal financial services, and do not have any economic, economic platform or anything at all to look after themselves. So we are using development interventions in Nigeria, especially from the central bank here. We are using developmental interventions, funds that are cheaper to scale these guys up. We also have social protection funds that go to families to cater for their children. Especially we give them to the women in the household, to cater for their children, because we believe when we empower a woman, we have empowered the entire family. So we make it a priority to pay the money, the social protection funds, to the woman and to look after the kids. And some of them are able to open accounts on the first day with that small money that we give to them. And they're able to onboard to financial services, and subsequently that money will be paid into their account. And then they could also use it to starting something small to earn income. Thank you.
I think that's a great way for us to end this panel and this discussion. I think we're just getting started, and it shows the power not only of data and sex disaggregated data to inform policy and what we're all trying to achieve, but also the importance of sharing learning across continents, across countries, so that we can benefit from each other's experience. Thank you. If we were all together, I'd ask you to join me in thanking the panel. Back to the organizers, please.
Thank you so much, Tamara. And thank you so much to the panelists, great panelists, and
Thank
a
you.
great moderator. Maybe
Thank you.
Tamara, you have another job coming if you want to do moderation. You're great. I just wanted, I'm going to now introduce the closing remarks, but before that, just to say that this panel, I think, has shown is the importance of the public sector and regulators in financial inclusion and in financial inclusion data. Has also, I think, shown very clearly the importance of having quality data. The data needs to be validated. The importance also, and the controversies, but the importance of dialoguing, the dialogue between the public and the private sector, and the issues of both transparency and privacy for data. And this, I think, is particularly important as we get much more digital financial services and fintechs. The issue of both transparency and privacy are critical. And finally, I think it was very clear throughout the panel, this is a very complex system with many different stakeholders, some that are regulated, some that are not. And I think is the challenge of dealing with all the different stakeholders, and they all have a role to play in promoting good data and in promoting the use of data for women's financial inclusion. Now it's my great pleasure to turn over to the closing remarks and introducing Dion Woods-Bell. She's a senior advisor for global policy for the financial services for the poor at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I think you all may have realized by now that we would have not been able to do this work without the very generous support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have been really pioneers in getting good gender data and getting good gender data for financial inclusion. I think, it is the foundation that is credited with Findex, and Findex has been a tremendous contribution to the field of gender data and of financial inclusion data. So Dion has just supported us and has provided incredible sort of technical and also, emotional support throughout the process of this grant. I mean, as you may all have realized, we have been working on this throughout the pandemic. So, it was not easy for anybody. And we are really very grateful to the foundation and to Dion for the times that she has spent with us and the support she has given. It's all yours, Dion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayra. Wow, it's an honor to be here and to be on the journey with the team. As Mayra said, it has not been easy. I'm so happy to be here at the launch of the Gender Data Playbook for Women's Financial Inclusion. And it's a special treat to be gathered with you all at this event that's co-hosted by Data2X and the Financial Alliance for Women in partnership with the Women's Financial Inclusion Data Partnership and all the many partners that make this work possible. So the frame for the discussion from diagnosis to action is so appropriate. I love what Mayra and the other colleagues said. Data is never just for data's sake. Indeed, data represents the stories of countries, communities, families, and individuals. Thanks to the moderator and the panelists for bringing these concepts to life. Thank you to Tamara from Kenya. Thank you to Paul, I won't mispronounce your name, from Nigeria. Thank you, Alba from Honduras, and thank you, Abdul from Bangladesh. You each painted such vivid pictures of the value of the playbook and how you used it or how you'll use it ongoing in your country. In your countries. We're looking forward to the data playbook being a useful tool to mobilize diverse stakeholders around a compelling agenda, a shared vision for driving safe, trusted, and inclusive use of sex disaggregated data. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation supports the development of financial sector gender data ecosystems because stakeholders need a complete picture of gender gaps in order to close them. The data, like I said, and like was said earlier, is not just for data's sakes. It helps to, it needs to be used and needs to be helpful for different actors, such as the financial sector needs to build the business case, and governments need to use it to develop inclusive policies. This gender data playbook is a first of a kind, and it's intended to provide a practical approach to developing gender data ecosystems. Let's talk more action. In developing a systemic approach, not an ad hoc approach. Let's not reinvent the wheel, but learn from each other. Let's work on a collaborative approach where countries' financial sector actors come together with a common North Star to close women's financial inclusion gaps. The importance of recognizing the roles of gender champions is also paramount in each country. And you heard from them, from our colleagues in Bangladesh, Honduras, Nigeria, and also our moderator from Kenya, who plays a key role in these issues. I love the link personally between the sex disaggregated data and digital public infrastructure that surfaced during the session. So although each component of digital public infrastructure, that is real-time interoperable payment systems, inclusive digital IDs, and data sharing protections can act on their own, it's actually the combination of these systems that will unlock the most significant impacts across economies. Governments can build more inclusive, secure, and resilient economies by investing in sex disaggregated data and these three components of DPI. So with the full suite of DPI in place, countries can scale a range of critical services that can benefit people's health and economic opportunity. We heard from our colleague in Nigeria how important it is to advance women's financial inclusion by digitizing government cash transfers, including those direct transfers to vulnerable women and women-held accounts, and designing programs in a manner that advances women's empowerment. We heard from colleagues in Honduras and in Bangladesh about delivering routine payments and salary payments and social grants to citizens' accounts rather than through intermediaries. Again, this is possible with sex disaggregated data. Sex disaggregated data helps build important components. Economies are at an inflection point where a huge social economic gains are possible if they embrace sex disaggregated data and digital public infrastructure. This is a gateway to deepening our understanding and impact. So what's next? We're looking forward to seeing amazing momentum surrounding these issues and the use of sex disaggregated data. The time is now. This is a unique time. We need to invest in sex disaggregated data and combine them with secure, interoperable digital public infrastructure to advance women's economic power and make concrete progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Now that we have the playbook, let's start using it. Together, we can build a more inclusive future. Thank you once again to the conveners. Thank you for all the work you put into the playbook, and thank you to all the partners for making this possible.
Thank you so much, Dion. As you say, let's use the playbook. I just want to remind the participants and the listeners that you can download the playbook. The link is in the chat book. And I think, as Dion well said, we have to start using it. And we at Data2X and the Financial Alliance for Women and the Women's Financial Inclusion Data Partnership would love to hear your views on the playbook, your comments, how you're using it. How do you think it can be better? Maybe we can do something different. So we really look forward to hear from you. And thank you so much to everybody for joining the session today. Good day.